Welcome to How to Find More Direct Clients Than You Can Poke a Stick At podcast, a mix of both solo episodes and expert interviews. Our ideal listener is an early career, ambitious, and passionate online language services provider. She is committed to professional growth and achieving success in the fiercely competitive translation and interpreting industry. She balances multiple responsibilities with resourcefulness, values mentorship, is open to learning, and investing in her professional development journey. She embraces technology and seeks to optimize workflow, eager to connect with like-minded peers and build out her professional network. She is determined to overcome challenges and become a sought-after freelance translator. And here's your host, medical translator and translator business mentor, Jason Willis-Lee.
Welcome to another episode of How to Find More Direct Clients, Freelancer Training on How to Find More Direct Clients, a podcast hosted by myself, Jason Willis-Lee, the show that makes digital marketing easier and much more fun using the perfect combo and just the right dose of business strategy and tech. I'm your host, Jason Willis-Lee, digital marketing geek. And today I'm so thrilled to welcome my colleague Nur Ferrante. Nur is a highly experienced linguistic validation consultant. She's teaching me all about this micro niche, and she brings a very unique perspective to our discussion. Nur, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hello, Jason. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Just tell us a bit about your personal journey and how you got into LV, linguistic validation, and a bit about your vision for how this niche is going to pan out. How did you get into this area?
Well, I really, it was by chance, let's say, and the field or the niche found me. I wasn't looking for it.
Okay.
It was over a decade ago, and well, besides being a linguist, I'm a physical therapist and an osteopath, and I had my clinical practice, but I also translated medical texts, and well, for decades also. And I was doing medical translation, and I was contacted by a company at the time, MAPI Research Trust, and they told me, "Would you like to do linguistic validation for us?" And I was, "What? What is that?" And they explained a little, and they said, "Well, you may need to do interviews with some patients and oversee a very complex process of translation and back translation and many different steps for these questionnaires that we use in clinical trials because, at the time they were working as a CRO. They have been absorbed by ICON, but...
Yep. CRO is a contract research organization, just for our listeners.
Yes.
So you mentioned back translation. I mean, I've seen back translations and I've done forward translations Could you just go through some of the steps in the linguistic validation cycle? I know it involves back translation, cognitive debriefing. Could you go through the kind of full cycle of steps?
Yes.
Involved?
Yes, because, in that story, I thought, well, maybe it's back translation. I can do that. And I said, of course, yes, boldly. I said, okay, yes, I can do that. I have patients in my clinic. I have a big network and so on. So they gave me a very brief training for each of the steps. And of course, I went like, oh my God, this is much more complex than I thought. And it entails, we translate these questionnaires that are used by patients or caregivers or also clinicians who are evaluating how patients feel, function, and survive.
Is it always in the context of clinical trials, or is there any other context where linguistic validation, is it always clinical trials?
It is mainly in the context of clinical trials because in multinational clinical trials, that's where most of these questionnaires are being used because now we have patient-centered clinical trials, right? So now we listen to the voice of the patient, how they feel, how their quality of life is, and so on. So the increased number of these questionnaires demands more skilled translators and linguistic validators, right? So these questionnaires, in order to be really understood by the population that are going to be using it in the many different countries, they need to be like exactly the same. But
Right.
these questionnaires tend to have a very common language, so they need to be accessible, and they need to be tailored to the country, the specific locale that you are translating them into.
Yeah.
So I remember they explained to me that this process was very complex because we need to comply with regulatory authorities and best practices guidelines as drafted by different institutional bodies like the United States FDA
yeah.
and the EMA and the ISPOR and so on. So
ISPOR, I'll just say, is the International Society for Pharmacoeconomics and Outcomes Research. That's the ISPOR.
yes, we
So,
have some entities, right, that are providing those regulations so that these questionnaires are
homogenized.
translated and
Yeah.
adapted in a way that will comply within all the necessary requirements of clinical trials in general. So we have like translation, cultural adaptation, but also regulatory issues. So we put all those together and we come up with a very complex and robust methodology that ensures right that this is correctly adapted.
Okay.
So
what is a
this is
patient
steps.
reported? What is a PRO? What is a patient reported outcome, and how does that fit into the LB cycle? Can you explain what a PRO is?
Well, a patient reported outcome is a questionnaire that well, it can be of different types in the sense of what is addressing in relation to, is it the symptoms of the patient, for example, is a specific condition, so is addressing different questions that pertain, let's say, respiratory symptoms, right? And the patient needs to, a patient who has a respiratory condition needs to fill them in and so on. But also we have the type of quality of life patient-reported outcomes, which pertain of how the patient is experiencing life in terms of work, in terms of being able to do activities, and so on and so forth. We have also PROs that focus on function, how the person is able to perform different activities and things of daily life tasks, like eating, drinking, walking, and so on. And then we have others that focus on burden, patient burden of the disease or the condition, but also we have others targeting behavior. So we have these different types, which what they do in the end is help the patient express how they feel, function, and survive, and what their symptoms are, because only the patient can express that. Other observer can show or say signs that they can see of the patient, but only the patient can say how they are really feeling inside.
So it's very
and
subjective.
If an intervention, yes,
very subjective.
It's absolutely subjective. And what it's doing is, for example, in a clinical trial, there's a drug that is being researched, and they give it to a number of patients who have, let's say, multiple sclerosis, and in the results of the let's say of the blood tests or the MRIs, they say, okay, it's going great, there's less inflammation, everything great. But they, for example, the patients fill in a PRO for symptoms of and quality of life, let's say, regarding multiple sclerosis, and the result is that they're doing terribly bad. Their quality of life is horrible. So all this is considered, and if at the end they see that, okay, the drug is wonderful and our biomarkers are doing great, but the patient is not in terms of quality of life or symptoms and so on, they are reporting that this is not good for them, then that drug cannot be commercialized, cannot be marketed. So,
Okay, so
it's as important as that.
So this sounds like a high value niche. It sounds to me like it's a more affluent niche. That's like a micro niche of medical translation. Would that be a correct way of describing it? It looks like it's more AI proof as well, because you need a human centric service here. So I think it's a great niche to break into. How do we break into the LV market? I know you've got a course just launching at the moment, a
Yes.
quarterly launch. Tell us about breaking into this niche. How do we do that? I guess it's by doing your course, and tell us the outcome of your course. What is the transformation from someone who's never seen LV after doing your course? What kind of transformation do you give them?
Well, to answer what you asked me first, and in relation to this, which you said the different steps, right? And I
Yep.
think I believe I didn't get to that directly.
Sure.
So it's in order to translate and culturally adapt these questionnaires, all the steps that we follow, it's normally we take two translators who are going to be doing two forward translations. And then we have a highly specialized person who is the linguistic validation consultant, linguistic validator, in-country consultant. We have several names for that person, who is one that is specialized in this clinical outcome assessments. That's how we call these questionnaires, in which PROs are included. And
is this consultant country specific? So there's one for France, one for
yes,
Spain,
right.
one.
This consultant is like a person who needs to be native in the target country, and also experience with or at least knowledgeable of clinical outcome assessment science, and with at least 5 years of experience in medical translation.
Right.
And of course, if this person can have healthcare or social science or psychology degree, that's even better, but it's not compulsory, let's say. And what this person will do is do reconciliation, like put together those two first forward translations and come up with a version, but taking into account what the developer has defined for each of the concepts that are going to be measured in the questions that appear, or items that appear in the questionnaire, because we sometimes are talking about very common things. We're talking about pain, we're talking about difficulty sleeping, difficulty walking, and these things seem very easy to translate, but in truth, these questionnaires go through very, very complex processes for development, and they have gone through a series of qualitative research, interviewing, and extracting, let's say, what's meaningful to patients, and then they have come up with the different concepts that will be relevant for creating this questionnaire, let's say, to measure whatever that researcher is intending to measure.
Who decides the wording of the questionnaire? Is it a clinician side decision or a patient side? I guess it's technical physicians.
The wording, you mean in the translation or in the development?
In the actual questionnaire that the patient takes, is that a clinician deciding the wording of the questionnaire?
Okay, yeah. Well, prior to 2009, which it's after the FDA considering the relevance of patient-centered clinical trials. Before that, many of these questionnaires were drafted by clinicians only, like considered experts. And of course, there was a literature research and many like concept elicitation interviews with clinicians and experts, and maybe, yes, patients associations or groups, but less focused on the patients and more considering what doctors or specialists in the field would decide that is meaningful for patients or that needs to be measured and so on. But after 2009, really, many of the clinical outcome assessments developed have the patients in mind. And there are cognitive interviews being conducted and patient elicitation interviews as well, concept elicitation interviews as well. So patients are asked what's important to them, what's the real experience with the condition, and the questionnaires are drafted directly taking into account what patients are living in their real experience. So then we have a huge difference when questionnaires have been drafted only by clinicians than when they have been also drafted taking patients into account.
Right,
Because
right.
when we translate, and then one of the steps I indicated that was not two forward translations, that we have a reconciliation, but that we have a back translation. No, the draft we produce, we back translate it, and then we make a back translation review or analysis. This specialist, this linguistic validation consultant, which is comparing the source text with the back translated
The original source text with the back translation.
Yes, and
Yeah.
if there are any discrepancies, we need to justify why is it so. We compare it with, this takes me to what I was saying previously about the developer is going to draft, or maybe the team lead within the whomever is taking care of the linguistic validation project. It's going to define each concept of these questions that appear. Let's say it's going to define pain in the context of that questionnaire specifically, or difficulty breathing, and so on and so forth. So we are going to be comparing. It's not simply a glossary. It's much more complex than that, which is called concept definition or list of concepts that we have. And we need to cross-reference it with our back translation, our source, and then try to match and see if the translation we have produces exactly that, like that. Matches, right, what we are intending to say in the source. Because then we do a cross cultural harmonization, in which that document that we have defining each of the concepts serves us to ensure that each question is going to maintain exactly the same concept, meaning that we retain what we call in COA science content validity, so that any person from any country is going to interpret the question the same way, and it's going to be able to respond correctly and not interpret it differently, having then a huge impact in the results and maybe in the entire clinical trial. Because if you have culturally adapted a question wrong, those patients may interpret it even in the opposite sense. And so clinicians, or the researchers, when they pull all the data, they may consider that, oh my God, this intervention is not good at all for these patients. Or on the contrary, it's great, and in truth, it's terrible. So we need to have the same questionnaire, even though it's in many different languages. So what we do afterwards is, in order to ensure that once we have gone through this back translation review, we have actual patients, or people who have the condition, or caregivers of patients, depending on the type of questionnaire and so on, who are going to be going through what we call cognitive interviews. And we're going to be asking them for their understanding of each of the questions in general, also the questionnaire. They are going to be paraphrasing, and so that we ensure that we have transmitted the source meaning into the target, and also that it's not offensive, that it's culturally sensitive, and that it's really adapted to the real use of the population. Because these questionnaires are going to be used by people from, well, let's say if they are adults, from people of all ages and different socioeconomic backgrounds and education. So it needs to be really accessible. When we have questionnaires for children, we also interview children and so on. So we tend to have to interview the same population that it's going to be used in the actual clinical trial. But these questionnaires are not only used in clinical trials, they are also used for medical diagnosis, for legal purposes, for the deciding in disability and so on. So they have a huge.
Okay, I'm a medical translator of
Mhm.
25 years experience. I do Spanish and French. I want to get into linguistic validation. I come to you for your course. What is your course called, and what is the exact transformation? I mean, you cover everything from A to Z about LV. How do I do your course? What is your course called, and what is the transformation? What is
Okay.
the from A to B?
Well, the course is called Linguistic Validation Specialization Course.
Okay.
And yes, the course covers all the steps, so that if you take the training, you will be absolutely prepared to handle projects as a linguistic validation consultant or linguistic validator, and work really from the start, because there's a huge demand for these specialists, and because it's very we really use localization here. So we need, for example, a person from, let's say, New Zealand, but we need Maori, right? The person to speak Maori. So, or if it's a person from a French, let's say it's a questionnaire in French, but we need it to be French from Belgium, not only French for France. And so we do linguistic validation with each of the variants.
Or Switzerland or Canada?
Yes, right. So we change. I mean, we localize it expressively. So this course, it's going to prepare you to be savvy on clinical outcome assessments, what they are, and exactly what you need to do for each of the steps, and also how to conduct this cognitive debriefing interviews, how to recruit patients, but also how to position yourself in the market so that you may be seen and may receive more projects. And then we have in this course, one of the good things that we have, which is within the art of diversity, which is my brand, right? The art of diversity training program, linguistic validation training program. We have a community that we have created with all the students that I've had so far, and also other specialists that have contributed one way or another. And we have.
Is this the Linguistic Validation Cafe? Is this the cafe that meets?
It's part of the Linguistic Validation Cafe, yes. In the community, we have also what's called the Linguistic Validation Cafe. We meet every month and we discuss things and topics, and then we come up with a podcast episode and we share. But we created, all of us together, and each of us who likes to talk about something specific or is more savvy than others on some topics and wants to share. It's like the special guest, but we also invite other people from the field, but also or related with the field, or who can help us grow and develop. And so our community keeps growing, and that creates a lot of synergies and also more opportunities for growing professionally, and also finding more clients, for sure.
So a lot of people are worried about AI, the rise of AI. They're looking for ways to future-proof their career. They're looking for niches to get into. Would you say that LV is a good niche to future-proof your career against the rise of AI? Because it seems to me that it's difficult to leverage AI for this particular niche. So it seems pretty human-centric. Would you say that is the case? And is this a good way to future-proof our careers and get away from all this AI leverage and just keep on going, staying relevant and competitive in the years to come?
Yes, definitely yes. We will see ways in which we can use AI in linguistic validation, because it's an amazing tool, and of course, we need to try to make use of it as best as we can. But for linguistic validation, it's clear that it's a tool, and it cannot substitute the translator input, or the yes. The ISPOR, which is doing now, ISPOR is doing now.
Could you just expand the acronym?
Research.
What does ISPOR mean?
Yes, it's it's the international. I'm terrible with. I'm a member, and I'm terrible. No, I don't want to tell you the
That's
acronym
just
wrongly. It's the
that's just fine.
International Society of Quality of Life Research,
Right.
and it has a special interest group, which is called Translation and Cultural Adaptation. And within that group, there are some working groups, and one of them has to do with considering the impact of AI in linguistic validation, or how it can be used, and so on. So there's been some research, thorough research in that direction. And it seems so far, well, we will see the results published very soon, but it's clear that it's not going to be as impacted at all. And for example, since linguistic validation requires such a high level of cultural adaptation and nuances related with everyday life as well, it's almost impossible that the AI cannot cover that. And AI cannot do cognitive debriefing interviews with patients. But also, we could think that maybe for back translation may work well, but the results are being I don't know, not good enough, let's say. So it seems that it cannot be used there either. Then we have the issue of, we may say, okay, we can use AI for the forward translations. We have 2 forward translations, so maybe one can be done by AI and the other one by a translator, and then we have the reconciliation. But the problem is that the AI doesn't have cannot apply the concept elaboration or concept definitions that I mentioned in that the developer has, and doesn't have like the nuances, because the terms are very easy, very common, and cannot anticipate that. So in truth, according to our guidelines, the idea of producing the first forward translation, I mean, the first like 2 forward translations and a reconciliation, was getting a team of experts and coming up with a first draft that is going to be back translated afterwards. But a way of simplifying that is doing 2 forward translations and 1 reconciliation. But if you remove one of the forward translations, you are like removing one of the members of the expert team. So you cannot do that either.
Is the reconciliation what happens after the back translation? So then there's a discussion between the forward translation. What's the difference between back translation and reconciliation? Is the reconciliation what comes afterwards? That's my understanding.
The reconciliation comes after the 2 forward translations.
After
it's
the
like
forward
putting together the 2 forward translations and coming up with the like a first
Oh,
draft.
I see.
And
Yeah.
that's what's going to be back translated.
Got it. Got
Yeah.
it. Okay. Is there any
But
reason...
then we do the back translation analysis or review, and we compare it again with that list of concepts that we have, and between source and back translation, and we keep modifying and pruning the forward translation, and that second draft, let's say, it's what it's going to go through cognitive debriefing interviewing, but also sometimes it goes through the developer's a developer's review. The developer will check that, or even the client, or even a clinician, depending on the project.
Okay.
And then we pass it on.
Is there any reason a cognitive debriefing interview will not give a reliable result? I mean, could you give an example of like a faulty cognitive debriefing interview? Are they usually pretty reliable?
Well, no, yeah, yes, there may be many times where cognitive debriefing interviews are not reliable.
Can
For
you give an example? Yeah, just give us an
yes,
example.
for instance, if we have an interview where we are not asking the patients to paraphrase,
Right.
like to say with other words what they understand or think aloud,
Yeah.
what it's like, what is this question asking you? Did you have pain in the last 24 hours? And if you ask them, did you have any problems understanding this question? And they say no, but you didn't ask them to paraphrase, so you don't know what they really interpreted. Yes.
Right.
Or other times it's if the interviewer does what it's called prompting instead of probing. you are asking the patient, let's say, so then you confirm that what you felt was pain in the last 24 hours? No? That's like putting words into the mouth of the patient instead of, could you please give me an example of what that would be for you? No, if they have difficulty, let's say, paraphrasing
Yes, rather
the
than
sentence.
leading the patient on, which
Yes,
is
because we are like manipulating in a way, or yes, getting them to where we want them to go instead of just listening and so on. And that can have huge repercussions because it may not serve its purpose and then jeopardize the entire clinical trial afterwards if
the
we haven't
quality of the
localized it
clinical trial.
and adapted correctly. Also, if we miss to ask if the questionnaire has, I mean, any question in the questionnaire has caused discomfort or made them is offensive in any way, or anything of the sort, because then we are not taking care of future issues that may arise. There are questions that are very difficult for some patients or some cultures, questions related to sex, questions related to abortion, questions related to different symptoms that maybe are more intimate, and people will not want to respond to that in that culture. And so you will not be able to extract the necessary data that you need.
Is there, under what circumstances would the FDA or say the EMA not pass a regulatory review? I mean, under what circumstances would they say, hey, you need a revision of this? Or could you give an example of a clause or a stipulation that might, or a translation that wouldn't pass a regulatory review? So when we're aligning our translations with the FDA and EMA, what are we actually aligning with? When would they say, hey, you need to look at this again?
Well, in truth, we need to take into account that we need to be very precise in all the steps that we do, because everything needs to be traceable. Everything needs to be reflected in a report. Each of the steps, every comment, every nuance, every change, every issue, and everything needs to have been resolved before producing what is called the final report and certification, which will, for each of the languages validated, will need to accompany the translated questionnaire, and that's going to be given to the client, to the researcher, to whomever has requested for this. But then, if there is an issue in the clinical trial and there is an inspection, let's say, all those documents are revised and everything gets back to you. And there are instances where maybe words, even one word has been interpreted differently. Even the word annoying, which has many different translations in, let's say, in Spanish. And if we translate it as being bothered, different as, being angry, well, it may have a problem, for a questionnaire that is related with behavior.
So that's a great question.
Say.
So what is your best strategy, sorry to interrupt, for handling ambiguous source text? What if something is ambiguous or has multiple translations, like annoying? How do you is it just ask the sponsor, or do you flag it? Do you author query it? What is the best response to that?
Yes, first, it's true that we work as a team. There are many members for each language. It's 2 translators at first, but then even though the linguistic validation consultant is going to be overseeing the entire process, we have the back translator, and then we have when we go through proofreading, we have a bilingual review that we do, but also we have monolingual review, and also the developer is going to review the drafts, and the client probably, but also we have the linguistic validation project managers who are going to be discussing with us some of the steps. So there are many, it's really a team working on this. And then what we do is, once we have done the back translation analysis, right, comparing source and target, and we come up with the second draft that we are going to pass on to the cognitive debriefing, we do what is called a harmonization, a cross-cultural harmonization, in which normally the project managers are going to be checking all the languages against the developers list of concepts, right? And checking, but they have to do it with the back translations because they don't know all the languages, right? If it's a project with 100 languages, the project managers don't know the languages. So it's the back translations of each of the segments that we compare. So if we have back translated, let's say, annoying as bothered instead of angry, in the back translation, it will appear in theory if the back translation has been done correctly. So when we do, as linguistic validation consultants, the back translation review, we review not only if the forward translation is matching the meaning of source, but also if the back translation is really matching the forward translation almost literally, because that's a very literal translation, but it's very difficult to do by artificial intelligence. So we need to change. If this is not matching, we need to change it here, or if it's not matching source, the forward translation, we need to change it, and also provide a new back translation to match that change.
So the LV project manager is a liaison between the LV consultant and the end client. So these queries go back and forth.
Right, because the work of the project managers, because we train project managers as well, who want to work in linguistic validation project, which is different from other medical translation, let's say, project management. It's not just sending over the files and maybe checking some things. You're really deep into it, and you have a huge responsibility in the process. And then you have to compare all the languages together and see that everything matches. And also, to give you the answer to your questions, yes, we ask the developer if we have any doubt or there's any ambiguity. We consider, we don't decide. We just, and if it's not clear in the list of concepts, what we do normally also is we go to the development paper. Sometimes the developers have published all the process of the questionnaire design, and each of the concepts are clear what each question is measuring, right? It's intending to measure. So in that article, you can find many answers. So many of those ambiguities get clarified while you are asking, the developer, because the developer may take some time to answer.
Where can my listeners? This is fascinating.
It's really fascinating, and it's really when we also, one of the most beautiful things this has is that we get into contact with patients, with people who we know we are contributing directly, and we are helping give voice. So it's not just our regular medical translation; it has a huge dimension, and is highly rewarding. And also for people listening to us who may say, okay, I would love linguistic validation, but not the part of cognitive debriefing. It's too much for me. Well, you can still be a linguistic validation consultant, but not conduct cognitive debriefing interviewing. It's perfectly okay as well.
Okay. Right? No, where can my listeners connect with you? Where's the best place to hear more about, to connect with you and follow you online? Which platform?
Well, I'm rather active, lately in LinkedIn, so that would be a great space. And then if they want to know more, we have the Linguistic Validation Cafe podcast, which we produce, and that's on YouTube for now. It will be in Spotify at some point.
Okay, we'll get links.
And they can go there and be familiarized. And then, of course, if they want to check the course specifically, they can go to my website, www.artofdiversity.org, and they can link there, or we can provide them the direct link to the course that it's going to start in May. The next edition is going to start in May. Although we have very little spots available,
How many
But if
spots
not,
do you have left? You had a total of 15. I think there's only just a couple of spots left. You're nearly
yes,
sold out. Okay.
right.
Okay, so get in
Yes,
quick.
because we need a limited amount of people. Otherwise, it's too much, and this is very precise work, and we need to be very, very focused, and we cannot be like many people at the same time. So it's very limited
So very
spots.
quickly,
Yes.
one final thought or one final takeaway, just very quickly, one phrase for anyone considering going into this niche. What is the notable nugget from this conversation? What's the big takeaway that that people have to take away from this? Someone's interested in LV, what's
Well,
the
if
next
you
step?
love medical translation and if you want to be part of really something that changes people's lives, and it will provide you with great satisfaction in both personally and economically, financially, it's really a great path. It surprised me. I wasn't ready more than a decade ago to step into this, and I'm really happy. It is a great way to diversify. You don't need to leave aside medical translation, because these type of projects are rather long. They sometimes take 2 weeks or up to 2 months or even 4, and you can perfectly fit them within your regular schedule. And I would say that we need you. We need you. We have more and more projects of this kind, and we really need any language variants that we can find. The clients are there looking for people who are linguistic validators, and
All right, there
so
you
it's a
are.
really great opportunity, and it's less impacted by AI for sure. Yes,
So
it's
high
a
demand
great
and
space.
future-proof against AI. All right, let's wrap it up for today. That's today's episode of Freelancer Training on how to find more direct clients. Stay tuned for more engaging discussions on the ever-evolving landscape of language and digital marketing. Until next time, stay on your game, and don't forget to future-proof your career in the AI era. Bye for now, and thanks to my special guest, Nur Ferrante.
Here's a fun fact about Jason. Jason loves watching Modern Family with his wife and 2 daughters. Thanks for tuning in to the How to Find More Direct Clients Than You Can Poke a Stick At podcast. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, why not head over to www.entrepreneurialtranslator.com to access all our tools and resources to monetize and future-proof your freelance translation business. And don't forget to hit the plus button in Apple Podcasts or iTunes, or subscribe in Spotify to be notified when new episodes drop. For regular tips and insights, business strategy, or marketing techniques straight to your inbox, please sign up at www.entrepreneurialtranslator.com.